I recently came across a New York Times article titled "Target Shooting Could Be Causing Brain Injuries." I don't think many folks watching my videos spend their Mondays reading the New York Times. Nevertheless, I subscribe to a couple of fake news publications, and anyone that's visited a range with any consistency is aware of the conversations that have taken place regarding ventilation problems, air conditioning problems, heating problems, lead levels, hearing levels at different ranges, and we've seen them open and close. But there's not a lot of conversation that takes place around these sound waves associated with larger calibers or prolonged exposure to calibers. So this is an interesting article. When I worked in law enforcement, the agency I worked with used an outdoor range, and all of my military experience involved outdoor ranges. So I didn't have much contact with an indoor range until I left the posse. My hand-drawn carriage generation, this might be true for a lot of us. Other than football or hockey, I never associated this type of brain injury to shooting or shooting on an indoor range. So I read the article and found some of the positions pretty interesting. I know a lot of folks pull their kids out of Pee Wee football, and other than Canadians keeping their kids in hockey, and they just enroll their kids in soccer out of concern of brain injury. But this article made me think and gave an interesting perspective that I don't think is often taken into account. Then they take a look at indoor ranges, which are pretty similar. Separated lanes, and although the paneling might be bulletproof, they say it's not shock absorbent, so it becomes like an echo chamber. Folks like my friend here are possibly like sitting their head beside some crazy sounding radio, and the skull is allowing the waves to bounce around like crazy. They say that folks can experience concussion-like symptoms after a range day. I've never seen that. No one I visited a range with, and I visited a lot of ranges, has ever complained the next day of ringing in their ears or concussion-like symptoms, because most of the time we're all wearing really, really good ear and eye protection, which is super important. I've heard more people talk about wanting to protect their hearing than I have heard. I've never heard anyone talk about these concussion-like symptoms, but it could be a reality. But even the science that they prove in the article, there's still a question mark over a lot of it. So they don't know how big the bang needs to be before it's going to mess somebody's head up. Or for the people like me firing 22s and 9mm, maybe there's microscopic damage that goes unnoticed. They just don't know. The Army's done some studies, but nothing is hard science exacting with regard to certain things. So what's in that plume that we call muzzle blast? Sure, there's sound, pressure shock wave that we're talking about in this video, hot gases from the projectile of the barrel pushing the projectile forward. There's also primer, powder residue, and microscopic particles, unburnt powder grains. So there's lots of inborn contamination, and this is what causes that visible flash and smoke. So they mentioned some studies the Army's done that field soldiers, when they're repeatedly exposed over a day of training to blasts that are 4 pounds per square inch, they showed signs of cognitive functioning that slowed down, which is some type of possible indication of brain injury. They set this screen up in their test behind there to show the wave effect of the repercussions, I guess, of the wave from shooting higher caliber. And they really don't know, because they do mention that like an AR-15 blast might be too small, but they talked about the prolonged exposure to these blasts. And research isn't there, because research seems to be focused on like artillery injuries, and a lot of the old research and maybe some of the new research is focused on eardrum injuries, and not so much so cognitive issues from the potential brainwave effects. But they're taking some precautions nowadays, supposedly in the military. I don't know what they're doing in civilian law enforcement because, or if they're doing anything in the civilian world, but they're taking some precautions to limit the exposure to continual blasts. Now, we've all been on the range, and I've been in many situations where I'm in a classroom setting and far away from the live range, and you hear that person that comes in, or you're in the lane beside somebody and they just go off with that cannon if they allow it. And now they say that there's more than just an effect on your eardrums. There's possibly an effect through some type of sound wave coming from there. But they gave some suggestions of what you can do to limit exposure. And I don't know if it's accurate or not because, if you live in California, taking a piss is going to kill you. But they found that if you shoot in outdoor range settings, which I do like, and before I've gotten all suburban and whatnot, and want my target to come to me instead of me walking to my target, they say rather than an enclosed booth. It does make some kind of sense that stuff's bouncing around, but hell, you put your cell phone up to the side of your face half the time, or you stick one of these Apple frickin' things in your ear all the time. So it's, if you can't, you're just swallowing it. But they say that outdoor ranges rather than enclosed booth can help, and they cut down one of the blast levels, maybe half, from according to what this article said. And they said if you're doing it indoors, extending the gun barrel beyond the booth, if that's even possible, because many times that's not possible. But they say that might be able to reduce some exposure. And smaller caliber weapons, and I know a lot of people aren't going to do that because they like what they like and they want to have a good time, and less powerful ammunition can also be helpful. There's even some ammo out there, like I know FN makes some stuff, or I think it's FN, but they make some stuff that's like lead-free ammo that's available also. So interesting article. Just wanted to share this, and hopefully it's helpful. Oh, I want to add, they also mention that a suppressor or a brass regulator to the muzzle. I've never used a suppressor, and maybe they put one on in the military. I didn't freaking know it. But they say that directs the blast forward and away from the shooter, can also make a difference. I have no idea. I only know is I think it probably gets your gun really, really dirty. You got to clean like hell. I would assume so. But it's one thing that they suggested, which was shocking to me, given that it's one of these fake news, but what's not fake news. So hopefully this was helpful. I'm sorry if I ranted too far, and you guys have a great day. Like and subscribe. I need to get to 1,000 subscribers. I should have been there already. Peace.